Hello, my name is Dan Bohannon. I'd like to ask you a few simple but very important questions. Are you interested in earning more money? Would you like to close more sales in less time? If we can show you some proven selling techniques that can help you achieve both of these goals, will you agree to practice these techniques and use them in your sales presentations? Well, we've just begun to sell you on the value of this tape program. We started with a couple of attention-getting questions directed at two basic wants: more money and more success. We then attempted to close or get your agreement by asking, if we show you, will you? Did you buy? Well, we hope so, because this program has information and techniques that will help you become a more effective memorial counselor. You know, it's amazing that, as important as sales are to every business, that so few people actually receive any training in proper selling techniques. The Sales and Marketing Handbook, developed by the MBNA, was the monument industry's most recent effort at providing formal training for the memorial salesperson. The member firms of the Elberton Granite Association encourage you to purchase and work with this valuable reference material. This program, Monument Selling Techniques, will build on the basics explained in the MBNA handbook and provide specific instruction on how to make an effective sales presentation. We will cover in this program buying motives, understanding the basic factors that influence all buying decisions; support discussion, getting to know your customer, determining interests, wants, and needs; the sales presentation, organization, delivery, and techniques; the close, asking for the order, recognizing buying signals; and dealing with objections, what to do when the prospect says no. Sounds interesting, doesn't it? Let's get started with a discussion of buying motives. What is it that makes people buy? It's been proven that all purchase decisions are influenced by 5 basic buying motives. They are pride, profit, fear, love, and need. In selling, we must appeal to these buying motives and help the customer satisfy as many of these desires as possible. The better we're able to accomplish this in our presentation, the more success we will enjoy. Each of these buying motives are explained in the accompanying written materials. We encourage you to read this information and see how the basic decision to purchase a memorial is influenced by these basic motives. As you give each of these motives some thought, you will find a number of important benefits that will influence the customer to buy. There's much more to a monument than the stone, names and dates, and the price. Before the sales counselor can meet with the client, he must be prepared with an understanding about the products available, company policy, and terms of sale. This program will not address training in these areas because they are items which are normally established by each individual company. We have, however, provided a few suggestions in the written material for establishing and working your prospects in a systematic method. The most commonly accepted practice of making contact with the at-need client is by direct mail and a telephone follow-up to set the appointment. Suggestions for using the telephone effectively to set the appointment are provided in the accompanying materials. We recommend that you study this information carefully when preparing your telephone script. Setting the appointment is the first step in getting the sale. The telephone can help you cover a lot of territory quickly and economically, so give this phase of your sales effort a lot of attention. Would you like an idea for a telephone opening or introduction? Try this.
Good morning. Am I speaking with Mary Smith? Hi, my name is Lee Duncan. The name may not ring a bell. We haven't met. However, we've written to you, and I'll need just a minute to introduce myself and explain why I called. I hope I didn't catch you at a bad time. Good.
By asking if you caught them at a bad time, you have asked for permission to talk. If they say no, then they have in effect given you permission to, in a sense, enter their home, at least verbally. When you get in, remember the objective is to get the appointment. Don't try to sell the product. That will come later. Your mailing and follow-up have generated an appointment at the home of Mrs. Smith. Before you actually see Mrs. Smith, you need to review the information you have to make sure you're fully prepared to answer all of her questions and provide the most assistance possible. For example, be sure you've reviewed cemetery rules and that you have a copy of the rules handy. If at all possible, you should visit the gravesite and note details about the lot and monuments on adjacent lots. If you're aware of the deceased's involvement in any particular organization, you should have examples available that show how this area of interest can be incorporated into the memorial's design. You must be prepared. This will convey professionalism and establish confidence in you and your firm. Every company should have a planned sales presentation. Listen carefully. I said a planned, not canned, presentation. The planned presentation organizes for the sales counselor the key information that will advance the prospect gradually from their neutral or even defensive position to one of interest, then desire, and finally to positive action. If the salesperson will learn the planned presentation, he will be able to keep himself and the prospect focused on the memorial. Let's look at the basic components of the planned sales presentation for the at-need, in-home sale. Support discussion. This is the time period when you collect information from the customer about the individual, the family, etc. Introduction. Provide information about yourself and your company, establishing your ability to help them with their decision. Presentation. Guiding the customer through the selection process. Close. Ask for the order. Reassurance. Reviewing the details and the benefits to the customer. And exit. It's time to go. While the material we have prepared is directed at the in-home appointment, the principles would apply for a walk-in prospect at your office. You would need to make some changes that would consider your facilities, display, and personnel. The first step in the sales process is getting the appointment. Then the second step is getting in the door. Getting in the door begins the minute you pull up to the prospect's home. Always be considerate of the other person. Park on the street if it appears you will block the driveway. Have your prospect card ready when you pull up, checking the name and address. Get out of your car immediately with enthusiasm and a smile on your face. You're here to help the prospect. Remember, a family member may be watching you through a window. As the door opens, take a slight step back. This will make most people feel more comfortable. When the prospect opens the door, extend your hand with an expectant attitude of welcome, just as you would approach the home of a friend. Identify yourself and your company, speaking slowly so that the prospect can understand. Explain that you are there to present your memorial service program, and then say,
May I step in, please?
Of course.
It's extremely important that every memorial sales counselor understand that what we're selling is remembrance, and remembrance involves emotion. Psychologists have placed a great deal of value in the memorial as part of the grieving process. The memorial becomes a focal point through which the surviving family members can express their love and anxieties. Most people, however, do not feel comfortable sharing their emotions with a stranger. Yet, to truly memorialize an individual, we must give the family members an opportunity to share their personal experiences, interests, and feelings. The only way this can be done is to demonstrate our interest in the individual and the family through a period of discussion. This critical part of the sales presentation is referred to as the support discussion. It's a period of time during which you support that family simply by expressing interest. By encouraging the discussion, you collect information about the deceased that you will need later on to create a meaningful memorial. If you're in the home, learn to be observant. Look for items of special interest, mounted fish or wild game, antique furniture, paintings, pictures of family members, any of which would help you initiate a discussion and show your concern. Throughout the sales presentation, you must be in control. Your prospect does not know what to do or what to expect. You establish control in the support discussion and direct the conversation until you're ready to bridge to the interest phase of your presentation. Don't rush this discussion and pay close attention to what the prospect is saying. They may give you important buying motives that you can use to tie down points of agreement during the presentation. Once you feel the customer is comfortable talking with you, lead them to the interest phase of your presentation with an introduction of yourself and your firm. Here is one way to make the transition from the support discussion to your presentation. The technique is called bridging. This is a simple procedure that can be used throughout the presentation. Because you've been listening closely to your prospect, you pick a point made by the customer and simply restate that point as it relates to your business. Here is an example.
You know, my grandmother made all of these.
Beautiful.
Yes, I'm so happy to have them. My family and my husband's family were all born and raised in this community.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
You know, your family heritage in this community is something to be proud of. By the way, did you know that Best Memorial Company had been serving families in this county since 1910?
No, I didn't know that.
I'd like to take a few minutes and explain to you why I think I can help you with the selection of a memorial. May I move this chair over here?
Oh, of course. Please do.
Thank you.
An important step in the process is to properly seat the client so he or she can see and hear the presentation. Notice also how the sales counselor maintains control by asking permission to move his chair. In some situations, the counselor may need to ask permission to turn off the TV or radio to prevent distractions during the presentation. You have now opened the door to the introduction portion of your presentation. Don't go back. Keep the conversation focused on you and/or your firm. From this point on, we recommend the use of a prepared sales kit to help the counselor lead the prospect through the interests, desire, and action portions of the presentation. A sales kit should contain very specific and carefully selected information that, when properly presented, will satisfy the buying motives of your customer. The written material provided with this tape contains suggestions for organizing your own sales kit. We hope that this sample will serve as a model from which you can build a kit which represents your company's products and services. Remember, you'll be showing this kit to your customers. Its quality will reflect on you, your company, and your work. Make it nice and keep it nice. Notice as the sales counselor goes through the kit pages that he uses his pen to call attention to key points. This is a very effective selling technique. For example, you're looking directly at the prospect while talking, and you want to direct their attention to a certain item on the page. Instead of saying, "Look here," we simply take our pen and point to the item we want them to focus their attention on. Once the point is made, move the pen until you need it again. There are a couple of simple but very effective techniques that we would like to suggest you use during your presentation. The first is the tie-down statement. As you go through the presentation, you should attempt to get the customer to agree with you on some of your key points: quality, service, experience, etc. You want to begin to tie down these items that satisfy those 5 basic motives we discussed earlier. You can do this by using statements which require a response from the customer. There are a number of different ways to use the tie-down, and a complete explanation is included in the written materials. Another technique used by the successful counselor is the head nod. Have you ever caught yourself agreeing with someone by nodding your head just because they were? Do you know why this happens? More than likely, the person who was speaking made a positive statement and ended it with a tie-down question while nodding yes. For example,
When you look at this rose, the shadow created by the deep carving makes it look very realistic, doesn't it?
Yes. Yes, it really does.
learn these two techniques and use them. They will help keep your customer in a yes mood throughout the presentation and help you accumulate several minor agreements before getting to the close. We begin our presentation with what we call the interest phase by introducing the prospect to your company and its management. A number of pages in the kit are devoted to establishing credibility for your firm and the quality of your work. It's important to remember your instructions about pen talk and how to use it to emphasize special points. Let's go to our counselor, who has already gone through the introduction portion of the presentation and is beginning his explanation of how they produce their work.
Mrs. Smith, over the years we've learned that very few people know what we go through in making a monument. So I'd like to take a few minutes and go through the procedure we use in every one of our monuments. The first thing our stone carver does is to make a pattern of the names, dates, and design that's to be inscribed. Then the next thing he does is he transfers that pattern to a thin protective rubber covering. The design is cut out, exposing the parts that will be carved into the stone. The carving is done by directing a pressurized stream of abrasive at the unprotected areas until just the right depth and shape has been achieved. This is an example of the carving we do on our memorials. This highly detailed rose is done in our shadow craft style of carving. The shadow created by the deep carving makes this rose look very realistic, doesn't it?
Yes, yes, it really does.
Mrs. Smith, the rose carving at the left is typical of production work. This is representative of what most other monument firms would be asking you to accept. Mrs. Smith, as you can see, we take great pride in our workmanship. If you were going to choose a rose carving for your memorial, which would you choose? The highly detailed rose on the right or the common production work on the left?
Oh, I think this one on the right, definitely. Definitely.
As you can see, we make the extra effort in all of our lettering. Which of these do you think would be easier to read?
Oh, the one on the top, without question.
That's because it's our deep cut lettering, as compared to the shallow cut lettering on this one. The name and inscription should be easy to read. Don't you think our deep cut lettering would be easy to read on your memorial?
Oh, yes, I do. I would choose that one, yes.
This chart shows some of the many different styles of lettering that are available. Our most commonly used style is the regular Roman letter because it's so easy to read. We'll consider these other different styles a little later. Mrs. Smith, have you ever seen monuments like this in a cemetery?
I'm sorry to say I have.
Do you know why this happened?
No, not really.
Because they didn't have a proper foundation.
The counselor will present the firm's technique for installing a foundation and again, getting a tie-down on just how important this service is to the appearance of the memorial.
You see what a difference a proper foundation can make? Now, Mrs. Smith, I would like to briefly review some of the things that we've talked about. Our granites are carefully selected for their quality. Our designs are sand carved by our own personnel using our own special shadowcraft carving techniques and deep cut lettering. All of our foundations are prepared using concrete a full 24 inches deep. We've agreed that all of these are important, haven't we?
Oh, very important.
The sales counselor has established the quality of his company's work by getting the customer to agree on certain key points. The customer has developed a perceived value for the memorial that will help the counselor when prices are discussed. The interest phase of the presentation is concluded with an explanation of the company's offer to guarantee the memorial and their work.
Mrs. Smith, do you remember these photographs we looked at earlier? Our promise to you, and we put it in writing with our guarantee, is this is a scene you and your family will never have to face.
The written text of this presentation includes information on language for introducing a company guarantee, an association guarantee, and MBNA's vandalism insurance. You'll need to develop this part of your presentation to fit your own company's method of operation.
As you can see, this double protection, our guarantee and this insurance, protects your memorial for generations to come. I would want a guarantee, wouldn't you?
Oh, absolutely.
The interest phase of our presentation has established value in our product and our services by appealing to the buying motives of pride, profit, and fear. We must next direct the prospect's attention to their need and awaken their desire to satisfy that need. This is what we refer to as the desire phase. In this segment of the presentation, we introduce the prospect to the various styles, colors, and designs that are available. At this time, we determine opportunities to personalize the design with meaningful symbolism, texture, and shape. It is here that the memorial counselor calls upon his knowledge and experience that will enable him to incorporate the personal information about the individual and the family into the design. As the memorialist, you should be able to explain the meaning of every element of the design that is presented to the family. The ornamentation placed on the memorial must be meaningful to the prospect. Otherwise, it's simply decoration, and the memorial becomes a billboard rather than an expression of love represented by meaningful symbolism. If you're not familiar with the meaning of various floral or religious carvings, we encourage you to review the material provided with this tape, as well as other sources, so that you can provide your customers a memorial rich in meaningful symbolism. At this point in your presentation, you must now start to qualify your prospect before proceeding. Later on, it will be impossible to close if you're trying to close on something they really don't want.
Mrs. Smith, let me ask you a question. Have you given any thought to the style of memorial you would want?
Oh, somewhat, but of course I'm not knowledgeable, so...
Okay, well, let's look at this chart and see what different styles are available.
After you ask your question, and the prospect replies by stating, for example, that she is interested in a double monument, then you will need to move on to the next section, which covers a choice of companion styles, traditional and custom designed. If she replies, for example, she has not really thought about it or doesn't know, then you will need to review the chart and carefully explain the difference in the styles shown. If you visited the lot prior to the appointment, you can advise Mrs. Smith of the type used on surrounding lots.
Yes, Mrs. Smith, the upright companion memorial would be appropriate for your lot, and it is the most commonly selected style because of its potential for design and personalization.
Once the style has been determined, you will then need to advise Mrs. Smith of the sizes that would be appropriate for her two-grave lot. Some cemeteries may have regulations, which you must explain, that limit the size or require a minimum size. Mrs. Smith does not have to make a decision on size at this point. She only needs to understand that she does have a choice. If Mrs. Smith starts to push you for a price, you will need to explain.
There are several decisions we will need to make about the memorial before I can give you a price. The size, the type of granite, and the information to be placed on the memorial all determine the final cost. Let's see what sizes are available.
In explaining sizes to customers, we suggest using a chart similar to that furnished in the reference material. This chart will help the customer visualize how the memorial will look when placed on the lot. It's often helpful to point out that objects tend to look smaller outside. The 3-foot coffee table in Mrs. Smith's home may appear big there in front of her sofa, but a 3-foot memorial may be disappointing to Mrs. Smith when placed on her 7-foot wide two-grave lot. We are now ready to lead Mrs. Smith through the action phase of our presentation. Mrs. Smith will have an opportunity to review designs, and we will employ a little physical action by letting her touch granite samples or flip through photographs of our work. There'll be some questioning as you complete the selection process by letting the prospect make decisions and take the action necessary to satisfy their desires. There are a number of different methods for developing a design with a customer. The most commonly used method involves the use of photographs from various industry design books and brochures. Another method is to use these photographs as a suggestion, but customize the design by combining elements from several designs, such as carving, lettering styles, and shapes. For the more experienced and creative sales counselor, an original sketch to include symbolism, lettering, and shape can be prepared for the client. Let's get back to our sales counselor as he helps Mrs. Smith with her selection.
Mrs. Smith, we firmly believe that a memorial should be erected because someone lived, and in that life there is a unique story that needs to be honored and remembered. Here are a few stories in stone I would like to show you. These monuments were created by families in this community that we have served over the years. As you can see, some are quite elaborate and others distinctively simple, but each one tells a story about an individual, a family, and collectively our community. Okay, this is for the McCowans. Did you know Patricia and Elwood?
Yes.
That's very unusual.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the Irish Shamrock, which is very, very unusual.
Very unique. Mm-hmm.
And then there's the Petries, William and Geraldine. Did you know them?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
And then you talk about unique and distinctive. This one here with a truck on it.
Mm.
Very unusual. Of all of these designs, which one would you like, Miss Smith?
I really don't know. Each one is so different.
The counselor has just shown Mrs. Smith about 10 to 15 color photographs of monuments they have made for other families. The monuments represent a variety of styles and colors, size and finish. The counselor must learn to listen closely to the client's comments as they review these designs. If they say they don't like something, ask, what is it about the design you don't like? On the other hand, if they say they like something, briefly explain the reason for its use and get agreement through a tie-down. If the prospect identifies a particular design or elements from several designs, you would simply develop a word picture of that monument, describing the various components, get their agreement, and move to the close. If they can't decide on any of these designs, then it's your responsibility as the memorial counselor to help them develop their ideas. Let's see how our counselor helps Mrs. Smith with her selection.
Based on our discussions, I believe Mr. Smith's faith and family were the two most important things in his life. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yes, yes, I certainly would.
And it's obvious that you, sharing your life together, shared these same values.
Yes, yes. My faith and my family are very important to me, more than ever now.
I would like to show you 3 designs which symbolically represent these values that you and Mr. Smith cherished over the years.
The counselor then shows the designs and explains the various elements which give meaning and purpose to the selection of those particular designs. With 2 or 3 designs presented, you then may have to use a questioning technique to advance Mrs. Smith to a choice of one design.
Which do you prefer, Mrs. Smith? The cross in the center or offset to one side?
This technique is called the alternate advance. It gives the customer a choice of alternatives, but it moves them to a final decision, as they must indicate a preference. Continue with this technique until agreement is reached. The next step will be to lead Mrs. Smith through the selection of the material to be used in the monument. You may want to present your selection in the form of granite samples, color photographs of various stones, or even nice color photographs of monuments or markers on your display. This should not be an involved process, but it may require a brief explanation as to some of the stone's properties to reassure the customer of its durability and design capabilities. If you have a large selection of granites to present, you may want to get Mrs. Smith to narrow the field before getting too involved in the cost aspect of her selection. One way to do this is by bracketing her choices. Instead of trying to go from 10 possibilities to 1, bracket the granites into the most likely 3 first, and then in a second step, isolate the one that is best suited to the customer's particular needs.
Mrs. Smith, as you can see, we have a number of premium granites to choose from. Basically, they are grouped in the 3 basic colors, the gray, the browns and the reds, and the black. Which do you prefer?
Oh, the gray color. This is what we have at my mother's grave.
That's a good choice.
You have simplified things for Mrs. Smith by asking her to choose 1 of 3 rather than 1 of 10. The bracketing technique can be used on sizes, price, and many other items to help the customer with their selection. More information about bracketing is provided with the written materials. With the color determined, we now have all the information needed to close the sale.
As you have seen from our photographs, we can provide a variety of monuments, and I'm sure we can develop your ideas into a beautiful memorial well within your budget. Based on the ideas we've discussed here today, I would like to recommend the 66-inch size for your lot. As you can see here on this chart, the base of the memorial will extend about halfway over each grave. The tablet would be 54 inches wide and 28 inches tall here at the tallest point. This will give added emphasis to the cross.
The counselor takes out his prepared price list and shows Mrs. Smith the price of the monument she has selected, size, color, and appropriate finish. He is now ready for a closing question.
To get started on your memorial, we only require a 25% down payment. By the way, would you like to have a full-size drawing of the completed design before we start the carving and lettering?
Oh, yes, I think I'd like that.
Good.
There are many types of closes you can use to get the customer's signature on the dotted line. Several techniques are provided with this reference material. The MBNA Sales and Marketing Handbook contains a number of additional closes which should be considered and practiced. After asking a closing question, wait for a commitment. Don't talk until the prospect gives you a buying signal. Remember, the first one who talks loses. If they can't give you a real commitment after 15 or 20 seconds, then continue.
Mrs. Smith, you do like this design, don't you?
Yes, yes.
And you like the idea of the double protection guarantee. With your down payment today, the balance would not be due until the work is completed, or we offer a 12-month installment purchase. On the monthly installment plan, your payments would only be $80 a month. Which would you prefer? Down payment and balance due upon completion of work, or down payment and 12 monthly installments of $80 a month?
I'll have to think it over.
You can now try the physical action close. Let's watch as our counselor does something where the customer will have to actually stop him to avoid buying.
Mrs. Smith, what was Mr. Smith's date of birth?
Don't give the prospect a question that they can answer with a yes or no. Ask a question that, when answered, gives you permission to write.
January 23rd, 1928. Oh, and I would prefer to pay in full when the work is completed, I think.
After you complete the contract, go over it very carefully with the customer. Have the customer verify the spelling of all inscriptions and the proper placement of the inscriptions on the monument. Have the customer sign the contract and provide them a copy as a receipt of their order and down payment. There is one more thing to do before leaving.
Mrs. Smith, every family we serve has family members or friends that might be interested in the services we offer, even on a pre-need purchase program. Can you give us the name of some of your family members in this area so that we might contact them?
You should always ask the client for referrals. Your customer may know of family members or friends that might be interested in discussing a memorial or your services. Don't miss this opportunity for a lead. With your signed contract, deposit, and referrals, your job is now completed. It's time to say good day and get to your next appointment. Thank Mrs. Smith for her business, remind her of the next time she should be hearing from you, and leave the home. Wouldn't it be nice if all sales could be made that easily? Realistically, we know that doesn't always happen. The typical customer is going to have some questions and objections. Hopefully, your sales presentation has been prepared to address the most common questions and objections you receive. But objections are a part of selling, and we must learn to overcome objections if we're to become successful. No matter what the objection is, whether it's not interested, we want to wait, or I want to talk it over with my children, the first objection should be treated simply as a request for more information. The first rule for handling an objection is to make sure the objection is valid. Provide information related to the objection, or restate benefits, requiring the prospect to either let you proceed or bring up the objection a second time. The second time an objection comes up, you need to follow these steps. Agree with the prospect. Restate the objection. Probe to isolate the real objection. Answer the objection. And reclose. Let's listen as our sales counselor responds to a few of the more common objections you may hear.
Well, this all looks very nice, but I just want to think it over.
I completely understand, Mrs. Smith. I wouldn't want you to make a decision without knowing all the facts and understanding completely the services that we can provide. But just to clarify my thinking, what is it you need to think about?
If no answer is given right away, the counselor should restate the benefits.
Our Best Monument Company's double protection guarantee assures you of the finest quality workmanship and material.
Oh, your price is too high. I got some brochures in the mail with prices much less than this.
Mrs. Smith, I'm sure that you can pay less for a marker, but you will undoubtedly not be buying what I have presented to you today. Price alone means nothing unless you consider it in terms of value. I believe every memorial should record for future generations information that expresses the interest and accomplishments of the individual. That's why we have taken time today to develop ideas with you that will be meaningful rather than suggest an ordinary catalog design. And you do like this design, don't you? Mm-hmm. And we agree that this cross and wedding rings perfectly stated your relationship with Mr. Smith, didn't we?
Yes, we did. Mm-hmm.
Other common objections are provided in the material that accompanies this taped program. You should review all of these objections and responses and be prepared when your customer says,
I need to talk this over with my children before making any decision.
If you're serious about improving your sales skills, the material presented in the video and manual will get you started. By following the pattern suggested, you will find your percentage of successfully completed sales will increase. While there can be no guarantee of overnight success, the methods and techniques presented are proven to be effective. You must adapt this material to your own particular situation, and then practice, practice, practice. The member firms of the Elberton Granite Association would like to thank the many retail memorialists who have assisted in the preparation of this program. We are most grateful to Mike Moore of Virginia Monument Company in Marion, Virginia, who provided us with the materials for the sample sales kit and the presentation, which he developed through many years of his own personal research. EGA encourages you to follow through on the planned presentation and learn for yourself that sales can be an exciting and enjoyable aspect of your business.